You know Sweden? How many Iraqis? Sweden? Little Sweden. Little Sweden. 8 million people. They've let in 22,000 Iraqis, refugees. We won't even let in the ones that help save American soldiers' lives. So it's just cruel. No wonder they hate us so much. They hate who represents us.
I promise to keep the follow-up real short. With respect to another distinction in the argument made with respect to tort reform. And it sounded as though your statement was in opposition to tort reform. I would suggest that this country is in desperate need of tort reform. We have current policy in the state of Oregon trying to limit lawyers' fees to 10%. I'm not sure that's the right solution. I guess I'm coming to you because the people who seem to benefit most from many of our personal injury and tort cases are either insurance companies or attorneys. And I'm wondering what kind of suggestion you would have for intelligent tort reform in America.
See, my main concern is that wrongfully injured people by toxic chemicals in the workplace or defective cars, or whatever, you've read about a lot of products, get compensation from their perpetrators and deter future perpetrators. 90% of the people who are wrongfully injured don't even file a claim. The total amount of money spent in this country to compensate the victims of product defects is less than what we spend on dog food. It's about $7 billion. And the same is true for medical malpractice. So my concern is, and I share that with the physicians who studied medical malpractice at the Harvard School of Public Health years ago, is not that there are too many lawsuits, there are too few. And now, that doesn't mean we can't make the system more efficient. It doesn't mean if lawyers take too big a share on a contingent fee or insurance companies, we can't deal with that problem. But our first priority has to be the quadriplegic, the paraplegic. How are they going to sustain themselves for the rest of their lives if you have a cap on pain and suffering? A child injured for life, age 4. Their parents are not going to be around for the expected life expectancy. So actually, the amount of money that changes hands is ridiculously small when you consider the injuries and the size of our economy and how much money the casualty insurance companies are making. They're setting record profits year after year. The trial lawyers only get paid if they win. It's called a contingent fee. They should never get more than 1/3. Some of them go for 40. You should never get more than 1/3, in my judgment. But they don't get paid at all if they spend hundreds of hours and the court rules against them. I wish doctors practice that way. No, they only get paid when they heal you. I think the system is one that doesn't deal with the great number of people who never get any justice for the wrongdoers and harm them. That's my main criticism of the system. But I think when you make perpetrators pay, internalize those costs, and they and their colleagues tend to become, and their companies tend to become more careful. Thank you.
Recently I saw Harry Reid, the Democratic Majority Leader, on The Daily Show, one of the screens you talked about earlier. His excuse for not ending the war is that the Democrats don't really have a majority since one senator was sick, and the war is supported by Joe Lieberman. What is your opinion of that?
For not ending the war?
Yes.
They could stop the funding of the war, except to return the slaves.
Essentially, Reid's argument was that the Democrats didn't actually have a majority in Congress because one of theirs was sick, and because Joe Lieberman was supporting the war.
That's for affirmatively voting to end the war. But when the appropriations bills come, they can block it keep blocking them until the right one comes. The Republicans do that to them all the time. It's called the filibuster. So, these politicians, hairy and slippery here.
My name is Roberta. My question's about healthcare again.
I'm sure you're aware that America basically spends twice GDP of any other Western country in healthcare. Over us.
Get closer.
America spends at least twice as much as a percentage of GDP as any other Western country in healthcare.
Yeah.
Yet it seems to get less returns. And the main difference between America and most other Western countries is the litigation surrounding healthcare. The fact that hospitals have to be so cautious because of it. So wouldn't you say that tort reform would be one of the major solutions to reducing the healthcare cost and thus being able to provide more healthcare to people in general?
Well, healthcare cost $2.2 trillion last year. The tort system, verdicts and settlements in medical malpractice, $7 billion.
I'm not just saying the payouts, I'm just saying the entire way healthcare is done in America compared to other Western countries, basically it's all about avoiding being sued rather than providing as much healthcare.
That's propaganda. Any doctor who tells you that he does an invasive test on you in order to avoid the prospect of litigation is committing malpractice himself. You see? I mean, that violates medical ethics. That's not just my opinion. They like to say that because nobody likes to be sued. Look, you don't like to be sued, I don't like to be sued, doctors don't like to be sued. How would you like to live in a country where nobody was sued? Let's see, Soviet Union, Communist China, fascist dictators. If we don't have the right to sue, we don't have the right to get our just compensation for injuries, and we don't have the right to disclose bad practices in hospitals, which might get them to shape up, and we don't have the right to deter future recklessness by hospital-induced killing 200 Americans a day for disease control. Right to sue is so basic that it's number 2 on the protest list are funny patriots against King George III. He said he's trying to take away our right of trial by jury. The first one is no taxation without representation. And you're right, the U.S. healthcare industry spends, it costs $7,100 per capita. And in places like Australia, England, and Switzerland, it's less than half that. Imagine. And in those countries, they cover everything. In our country, $7,100 compared to $3,400 in Switzerland covers everything. $7,100, you have 50 million people without coverage, and many more undercovered or full of exclusions, deductions, co-payment, you name it. It is a terribly inefficient system that's been condemned by one report after another. Harvard Medical School professors, people who practice medicine, people who study this, 59% of the physicians in the whole last month want a single-payer health insurance system, similar to Canada's. And Canada and Western have far better outcomes. They have higher life expectancy, lower infant mortality. The outcomes of the system. Nobody dies in these countries because they can't afford health care. That's not true in the United States. It should be raised that point because most people think if you get single payer, full Medicare for all, it's going to cost more. What do you mean it's going to cost more? Other countries do it for half. You look at the wages in Switzerland. This is no third world country. They pay top wages. They're very comparative. Can't say, oh well, you know, this is Malaysia. The doctor works $10,000 a year. It's a horribly inefficient, perverse system, perverse incentives. Over drugging people, too many prescriptions, too many unnecessary operations. The system has been documented by reports, by 60 Minutes, Wall Street Journal. We don't need any more details. We've got to make it a system that, one, gets rid of those huge administrative expenses of Aetna, and the single payer is much more efficient. 2, it gives you free choice of doctor and hospital. 3, it eliminates over $200 billion, and this could be well documented, of computerized billing fraud and abuse. Because there's so many different payors, insurance companies, cross-billing, fooling around with those. Single payer, you don't see a bill. Single payer. The government is the insurer, and you have private delivery of medical services under cost and quality controls. It's going to blow a hole through the roof. You know, when I started looking at this, when Medicare came in 1964, the healthcare costs this country 3% of the gross domestic product. It's now 16%. It'll be 20% in another 5-6 years. It's going to devour the economy. There's really no end to it. other some cataclysmic economic cliff fall. And still we have tens of millions of people not covered. So you don't want to blame the tort system. That is one of the distractions. If you got really look every day. Look, doctors in hospitals have made millions and millions of critical decisions every day. You just have 1 or 2%, or 5 to 10% of the doctors who are incompetent, which is about the level. They shouldn't even be practicing medicine. You get a lot of people hurt. There are people who, the wrong organ is taken out. There are people who are cavalierly diagnosed as, okay, you go back home, they got cancer. And 8 months later, it's critical. We just can't countenance that kind of system. It's got to be held responsible and accountable.
My name is Dr. Mayhem, and on the way over here, I stopped at Fred Meyer's doing shopping. And as I was walking to the store, a woman looked at me and saw my shirt, and she gave me a big thumbs up. Okay. And occasionally lately I find when I'm in some public place and someone sees my t-shirt and I have the nerve to wear your t-shirt, I get a thumbs up in this round and say, good for you, right? Now I have a cable access television show called Conversations with Dr. Don. And occasionally I ask my guests, who are your heroes? And they decide a few and they ask me who mine are. And I say, well, Noam Chomsky and Howard Zinn and Martin Luther King and Ralph Nader. And there's this silence. And then they'll ask me, how can you support Ralph Nader? He's going to cause big difficulties in this presidential election again. What do I say to them in the few minutes time that I have, why it is that I find you one of my heroes? I think that 100 years from now, history will show that I'm pretty surprised that you indeed were heroes over time.
I don't have to tell you what to say. You probably got 20 answers. I mean, why do you have to be apologetic? They expect you to be apologetic when they're not apologetic for supporting warmongers and people who turn the country over. It's all part of the political bigotry inherent in a two-party elected dictatorship that basically says to the small challengers, we don't want you on the ballot. Why are you running? Don't run. Shut up. Don't use the First Amendment, which is what you do when you run for election, free speech, petition, and assembly. The constant use of the First Amendment. It's political bigotry. They did this to minority voters years ago. They're doing it to small party independent candidates. That's what we have to break. If we don't get more voices and choices, guess what? We just get more of the same. As far as the amazing thing about these liberals, this is what happens when you're a prisoner of a 220-year-old run electoral system that most people in the Western world can't even understand. You know what the electoral rules here, what you can do, what you can't do, initiative, get on the ballot in Oregon. It's a nightmare. A nightmare to preserve the exclusive control of your vote by those two parties. And they want to tell you, you either vote for us or you stay home. They don't even like binding none of the above, which was my favorite reform. You go down and vote no to both of them. If you get more none of the above, it cancels the election. It gets you the election. But take Florida. Florida was stolen by the Republicans from Tallahassee to the Supreme Court. The Supreme Court selected Bush, wasn't elected. They stopped the Florida Supreme Court from completing a statewide recount. Just see that. 5-4, Republicans were the 5. It was a clear political hack decision. All right. So the Democrats who blame the Greens, when you ask them, who won in 2000? They'll all say gold. What happened in Florida? It was stolen. You mean there were thieves? Right. So why don't you go after the thieves instead of the Green Party that shares a lot of your political agenda? Because they didn't go after the thieves of Florida, they got an encore in Ohio in 2004. Republican-dominated state. Guess what? They had voting machines unused, dumped in the warehouse under the direction of Secretary of State Blackwell. And they had plenty of voting machines for Republican-dominated districts and precincts, and shortages of voting machines for the Democrats. So you had 4, 8, 10-hour lines in places like Canyon, Ohio, downtown Cleveland, Oberlin, where they're Democrats. Huh?
The damn Bureau on Kenyon's a college.
Yeah, students. Yeah. We're Kenyon College students, right? And so a lot of them just peeled off, to pick up the kids, go to work, go to class. That's just one of 20 ways the Republicans got Ohio. And Ohio's a swing state. If Kerry won Ohio, he'd have been president. The Democrats have to look at themselves in the mirror and stop looking for scapegoats. They have to look at themselves in the mirror. Why? They haven't been able to landslide for 25 years the most craven Republican Party in the Republican Party's history. That's the question we got to ask. Why have you become so good at electing such bad Republicans? Let's put it that way. Yes. Yes.
I want to thank you for being here tonight. My question is about NAFTA. I think that affects all of us in our day-to-day life. I feel like I can't even go buy a T-shirt at this point in time. I want to know what your thoughts are on how we can undo the damage done by this.
Well, the World Trade Organization, NAFTA, signatories, is provision in the trade agreement saying you can pull out, the U.S. can pull out in 6 months' notice and renegotiate. These trade agreements reverse the way we progress in our country. The way we progress in our country was to tell corporations that even though they think they can make more profit by producing unsafe products or hiring child labor earlier in the 20th century, they can't do that. They have to subordinate their commercial priorities to human rights, labor rights, environmental rights, auto safety rights. That's the way we progress. Now, what NAFTA and WTO do, very clever, this is really a silent coup d'etat by the corporations. And polls show Americans opposed both of them when they were going through Congress. They smelled some of that. Is they subordinate to trade, to commerce, labor and environmental concerns. So that we had 5 environmental regulations that were challenged under the World Trade Organization in the secret courts in Geneva, Switzerland, by foreign countries, who said, your environmental regulations are so strict, they're restricting imports into your country, from our country. Therefore, you violated the trade agreement. We've lost all 5. We have to change it. So that's why we've got to get rid of these trade agreements. They're secretive, autocratic, they bypass our courts, they strip us of sovereignty that is not necessary. All trade agreements lose some sovereignty, and they subvert our democracy. They are creations of multinational corporations to pull down our standard of living by allowing unimpeded trade to trample environmental, worker, and consumer laws, and to go to dictatorships without any tariffs, without any labor, environmental standards, where they exploit their workers, but the workers work hard with brand new equipment, and they ship it back in this country. That's the deal. That's what they're doing. And so, whenever you get someone say, NAFTA and WTO are free trade is good for everyone, tell them this. You can't have free trade with dictators, because dictators determine suppressed labor conditions, suppressed labor costs, how much you're free to pollute, not the market. In China, the dictator keeps wages down, smashes efforts for independent trade unions. That's the one answer they don't know how to reply to. So if you want to cut it short in an argument, just say, you can't have free trade with dictatorship.
I'm just curious as to how as a country we're ever going to repair the damage that's been done over the past, what, a decade or so now.
The lost jobs are the lost jobs. I mean, a lot of the auto industry went into Mexico, is moving to China. Electronics industry moving to China. But what we can do is change these trade agreements, and even now Obama and Clinton are talking about changing the trade agreements. Not that they will, but they never even talk about it, because they feel the heat from workers when they can't hollowed out communities, shut down factories. The conditions that they're observing in their campaign tours put the lie to the theory behind these trade agreements, that it's a win-win situation for everyone. Can you get closer, please?
Yeah, I'm sure. Okay. Thank you. I'm so glad to see you again. Now, this is the 3rd time I see you during election season. I was in Portland in 2000 at the Coliseum for a very, very inspiring rally that I'll never forget.
Yeah, 10,000 people showed up.
10,000 people showed up. A lot of people never left to sit down because the Coliseum was absolutely full.
There are people here that make it possible. Right here.
That's right. What worries me more, though, is that in 2000 we had 10,000 people in Portland, and it just seems like the numbers are diminishing. I went to a talk the other day by Norman Solomon, a media watchdog, a media critic, yes. And he mentioned your campaign. Actually, you brought it up. And one of the things that he said just shocked me and took me back. He said, the corporations love Ralph Nader. And it was shocking. And, he never exactly followed up, except for, the same spiel that you're going to take votes away from the Democrat, and then we're going to get a corporate cheerleader, John McCain.
See,
the same thing over and over again.
I talked to him. He and I are almost on the same wavelength on all these issues.
Oh, I
but he's
know.
against
Yes.
our candidacy. So I say to him, Norman, you agree with our agenda? Yeah. Then you support us? No. Then do you support the Democrats? Yes. Why? Because the Republicans are horrible. Have you been critical of the Democrats? Like every week in his life. So why are you supporting the Democrats? Because we got to get rid of Bush and the Republicans. So are you making any demands on the Democrats? Are you trying to make your Democrats better so they can landslide the Republicans with a mandate from back home? They don't ever make any demands. All these liberal groups supported John Kerry. We checked all their websites, 19 of them, women's rights, anti-war, labor, all the rest. Didn't make a single demand on John Kerry. You don't want to upset him. He's saying he wants more soldiers in Iraq. You don't want to undermine him from the left.
When Obama was in, Obama was in Eugene, I couldn't get anybody to go with me to even hold up posters saying something like, what's wrong with single-payer health care?
Well,
why not out of Iraq now? None of my friends, none of my progressive friends will do that kind of demanding of the Democratic Party.
That's the point. And if they don't make John Kerry better, he gets worse and he fuzzes himself with Bush and he didn't have the right line. And he loses to this guy who's 28% in the polls. So Norman Solomon, dear Norman, what you got to do is ask yourself the question, why don't you try to put pressure on the Democrats using our candidacy, if you like, as leverage? And why don't you say to the Democrats, if you don't like the Nader Gonzalez candidate, why don't you pick up living wage? Why don't you take their whole agenda? They keep sending it to.
Instead of take back the Democratic Party from the bottom up.
Yeah.
And I told him, I'm going to take over Wolf, I'm going to take over Halliburton.
Yeah.
Get a job.
I mean, the nerve of Norman Solomon saying corporations like me.
Yes,
Why doesn't he go and interview the corporations to see how much they like him? Now, the thing is that don't have any patience with these people. These are wittingly or unwittingly politically bigoted people. He runs a press newsletter that fights for free speech and dissent, and he's trying to shut us down. This is the consummate hypocrisy of the nose-ring liberal who provides the corporate Democrats with the tether. I wish he was here on mistake, and I give him 10 minutes to try to defend himself. You're either for the First Amendment or you're not for the First Amendment. Remember the old saying? You believe in the First Amendment when you defend the right of someone you disagree with to speak. Well, he doesn't even defend my right to agree with him on the issue because he's a nose-ring liberal with the tether. This is a very serious problem, and the liberals and progressives have that attitude are never going to win. They don't know how to bargain, they don't know leverage, they give their votes for granted to the least worst, and when they say to the Democrats, well, we've criticized you, but you're not as bad as the Republicans, here's our vote, take it, they get taken. You don't make the Democrats better, you're going to end up with the Republicans winning, or the Democrats winning like Republicans. That's what it comes down to. Try to get that through their heads. It's very difficult because bigotry is very difficult to change. Yes.
Thank you for having the courage to run again for office. I think that's really good. Ironically, I also know personally several people in 2000 who did not vote for you because they were afraid of Bush. So I think you had votes taken away from you.
Exactly. Gore took farmer votes away from him. And Bush took farmer votes away from Gore, and 250,000 registered Democrats in Florida voted for Bush in 2000, and everything else the same. If Gore won his home state, Tennessee, he'd have been president. If he won Clinton in Arkansas, he'd have been president. If the mayor of Miami didn't take off to Madrid and not bring out his votes because he has a grudge, he had a grudge with the Democratic Party, he'd have won Florida even with all the thievery. Why are they picking on the Greens? Because they cannot stand to look at themselves in the mirror. And they cannot stand the fact that they can no longer defend America against the worst Republican Party in existence. That's what's at stake here. This is a corrupt, decaying party where the better parts of it, the liberal progressives, are playing along with it. I mean, as long as Republicans control the left in this country, such as it is, the liberals, simply by becoming worse. Republicans become worse. They both die off the same corporate dollars, Republican, Democrat. So the Democrats say, hey, we can become a little worse too, because the Republicans are worse. And that's the way it is. Every 4 years, both of the parties get worse. Both of the parties get worse. You got to strip them of their excuses. You don't like challenges from the liberal, the progressive side? Take the agenda. The old Democratic Party would have taken this entire agenda, except the Middle East issues. They'd have taken single-payer health, that was Truman, living wage, Roosevelt, Truman. All these issues are old Democratic Party issues. So why don't they adopt them and landslide Republicans? Because they are corporate Democrats. They die off of the same dollars. They're interested in self-perpetuation of their jobs rather than the well-being of the American people. Have somebody as intelligent as Norman Solomon made a statement like this? This is the decay of the liberals and of the progressives. I mean, why don't they think about all these people who are dying in this country? Because the Democrats don't lift a finger to say workplace disease, hospital negligence, all that. They don't do anything about it. OSHA was dead in the water under Clinton. Dead in the water. Not one single chemical control standard in 8 years. They never demanded the auto companies to make their cars more fuel efficient. 8 years they didn't propose it. How many times do we give them? How many years do we give them? Who cares about these parties? It's the people who are suffering, who are deprived, who are dislocated, who are cheated, who are hurt. That's who we care about.
I have two questions and then a follow-up question.
Hang on. Just ask one question, please.
Okay. Well, the one question I want to ask is, one of George Bush's first acts as president, under the executive branch was that, I'm sure you've heard of this executive order where he signed the presidential papers will now be personal property of either the president or the president of the citizen. Will you overturn that, and B, if you do the Google debate, will you bring that up in the debate for public knowledge? Yeah,
we're the greatest advocates of the Freedom of Information Act. That's public property. And that shouldn't be put in these presidential libraries where they can be subject to copyright restriction to historians or reporters or citizens. I don't know how long that's going to last. That may not be something he's going to make stick. This group called the National Archives, it's a citizen trust.
Well, there's only two parties that are interested, and they're each interested in covering up their own needs. It seems like it could take our...
Well, we have sued, for example, to get a lot of Nixon papers out. We succeeded with that under the Freedom of Information Act. Now with electronic stuff, it becomes a little bit more complicated, but it's good that you raise that, because that's when you can really evaluate the guts of the presidency with those papers.
I don't think a lot of Americans know that the executive order even exists. So would you bring it up in the Google debates?
Well, yeah, I mean, among 1,000 other things. I'll bring up freedom of information against government secrecy, because that's central.
It's the executive order may actually...
Executive order could be overturned by another executive order. It doesn't even require an act of Congress. So it makes it easy, though, for a succeeding president. Yes.
My question is, how would you fix or amend the international, industrial, and somewhat social crisis of peak oil?
Unfortunately, I don't agree with the peak oil theory, because the higher the price goes, after all, you know, the price per barrel of oil was $40 a barrel 2-3 years ago. It's now $123 as of yesterday. The higher the price goes, the more they can go into tar sands, the more they can go into low-grade reserves, the more they can recover wells that were exhausted by definition of 20, 30 barrel oil, but they can go get it at 100 barrel oil. There's a lot of hydrocarbon in the world. And unfortunately, we've got to have a different attitude, which is, we've got thousands of years of hydrocarbon. We cannot use it, whether it's coal, oil, gas, tar sand, because of the global climate issue, acid rain, all the things that we know of. So when you say peak oil, it doesn't take into account the ability of the oil cartel and the oil companies and New York Mercantile Exchange speculators in driving it up to 200 barrels, $200 a barrel. That's one of the predictions. It's going to go to $6, $7 a gallon. And that means they can go into the Alberta tar sands, into shale in West Virginia, wreck the environment, and because they get such a high price, they can spend a lot of money getting those low-grade reserves. They're low-grade reserves, but they're huge. The amount of oil in the tar sands in Alberta is equivalent to the oil in Saudi Arabia. But you should see the wreckage that's going on in Alberta. Can we have a okay. Yeah, we have to sign books and do all these things. You know, I can stay on forever. Nobody can. You have to go to sleep, and you have to sign books. Is there anybody here who has given any contributions who wants our volunteers to get to you? Because you had your hand up, they didn't get to you. Go ahead.
Today, or yesterday, a month of 60 years of Palestinian.
Could you get closer, please?
Yesterday was a mark of 60 years of Palestinian suffering under occupation, which is Israel celebrated its own creations 60 years ago. And which yesterday also Bush daughter celebrated her engagement or wedding. So I was going to Obama's D-Day with Clinton, and the questions was if he wanted to sit with Palestinian officials or Iranian officials. He said he's willing to sit with Ahmadinejad, the president of Iran.
Yeah.
And he's against Jimmy Carter meeting with Hamas officials. So what's your view on sitting with what America called terrorists?
Well, that's Obama's problem, isn't it? That he says on one hand, if he's president, he'll meet with heads of state who are our adversaries, or we consider them our adversaries. But then when Jimmy Carter, who's the best friend Israel ever had in the United States, he's really a great ex-president, goes and meets with Hamas, which 64% of the Israelis want the Israeli government to negotiate with, he backs up. Obama says, I wouldn't do that. I don't agree with that. See, there's no political fortitude here. He's a smart guy. He taught constitutional law. He knows the score. He knows who has the power, who doesn't have the power. He has a sense of justice and justice. He doesn't have the guts. I watched him as a senator. He's not a transforming senator. He isn't a third in Senator Wilson. He doesn't have the guts. And if you're in the White House, you've got to be a transforming leader to turn this country around. That's the problem.
I'm glad you're here tonight. I proud voted for you in 2000. I'm in Obama's 40s here. But I still want you in debates. I still want your voice heard. And I still want you to drag this Democratic Party to the left as best you can. How can I support you without being afraid that I'm going to help get the worst of the worst elected?
Very simple. Whatever you do in the voting booth is your business. No one will know, right? But what you can do in May, June, July is say to Obama and millions like you, we're not going to vote for you unless you come up with a specific living wage that is at least the purchasing power of 1968 minimum wage, which is $10, for example, or $12. And unless you do this in the list, unless you attack the military budget, which is swarming with what Eisenhower wanted from, the military-industrial complex. They're eating the heart. Unless you challenge these corporations, they're eating the heart and soul out of America after benefiting from taxpayers and the sweat of workers, and put demands on them. Now, in your mind, you want Obama to win. The way to make him win is to vote for him in November. You don't have to signal it in May, June, July. Play a little poker for heaven's sake. Gonzalez ticket. Have 2 buttons. Say, I'm for Obama if Obama adopts Nader Gonzalez agenda.
Will you promise not to campaign in states where you like?
No, of course. Do you think I would disrespect voters? Well, up until now, I was going to classify you as a superb civil libertarian. Now what you want me to do is say, well, I'm not going to give voters in these swing states a chance to vote for me because I'm really a dark horse candidate for Obama or Clinton or whatever. No. When you run, respect all the people in all the states. I go to 50 states. It's about the voter having a choice. I'm trying to get on all these ballots in order to give our voters a chance to vote for us, and then suddenly I say, I'm out of Florida and Ohio. Sorry, folks. That destroys any integrity of the third-party independent candidates in the future. In the 19th century, when it was easy to get on the ballot, all these little parties never won a national election. But are we ever glad that some voters voted for the anti-slavery, labor, farmer, and women's right to vote? No one today says, don't vote for Nader Gonzalez because Republicans are worse than Democrats. Would ever say that they're glad, they're angry that there are voters who voted for the Liberty Anti-Slavery Party instead of going for the least worst in the Whigs and the Democrats. Now, see, it's okay. They're all right in the 19th century. It's just the 21st century. They have trouble with more voices and choices. Yeah.
I hadn't planned to say this, but it's a good follow-up. I tell people I voted for you, and they often say, I did too. And I say, well, I voted for him in 96, 2000, and 2004. And don't tell me that I thought you like George Bush, because John Kerry can't debate George Bush and win that he doesn't really want to be president.
Yeah, well, the other things, there are about 39 states that are slam dunk Republican in America. So what's the excuse that people want to send them a message? I've been campaigning in Texas, and they come up to me and said, we don't want Bush to win. We'd like to vote for you, but we want Bush to win. I said, I mean, give me a break. Kerry never went to Texas one day. It was gone for Bush. People need to be more strategic. You know, someone said, how smart would you like American voters to be? Here's my answer. As smart as they are sports fans. You know, the record, the strategy, the tactics, so on and so forth.
I recently reread a quote by Judge Lurdenham, judge of the Nuremberg tribunals, and I believe, my memory serves me correct, Oregon judge, and it reminds me of what you've been trying to teach us since I first read about you 40 years ago, and it's something like this: liberty lies in the hearts of men and women, and when it dies, no constitution, no law, no court can save it. Anyway, a brief message. I got some handouts for liquid natural gas.
Let me have one of those.
I sure will. 36-inch high-pressure pipe to go all through Oregon. The gas will all go to California, almost all of it. So I'm asking everybody here to please call or contact Governor Kulagowski. It'll take you just a couple minutes to tell them no to liquefied natural gas. Thank you very much.
Okay. We really have to end it soon because we've got to get your books signed.
Yeah, hello, Mr. Mayor. I just have one question.
Keep close to the mic.
Yeah, sure. There's so much corruption in our government and so much injustice in Washington and stuff like that. If you were to get to the bottom of it, if you were to really rip into the crime in Washington, what kind of government would we have? Would there be anything left?
There'd be something left that would be efficient, responsive, and would wake up every day and say, this is the government I'll fight for the people, instead of other voters by the Exxons with the DuPonts. Put it in a few words. The other thing that's important, I hope when you leave this auditorium, that Congress watchdog idea lingers in your mind. You change Congress, you change the federal government, you change the federal government, a lot of good things can happen. Yes.
Thank you.
Mr. Nader, it's a privilege to be in a room with a man of your character, intelligence, and wisdom, and most importantly, the ability to articulate the big picture to multitudes of people. I hope
hope dearly that you get the airtime that this country and this nation deserves. I'd like you to comment briefly on the fiat system of currency, one that has no gold standard or no verifiable, comparable way of justifying the value of the currency. In addition, I'd like you to comment or maybe articulate the dangers of having an independent organization such as the Federal Reserve as opposed to the government. The Federal Reserve is basically just a contract banker for the U.S. government.
Yeah, we're the only Western country that doesn't have an accountable central bank. The Federal Reserve is our central bank. It's a powerful regulator on behalf of the financial interests of this country, and it's funded by the banks. It's not funded by your tax dollars. So they can thumb their nose at Congress, or anybody in Congress that wants to hold them accountable. As far as the currency, fiat currency, that takes a long time. We have a lot of international currency speculation. It's getting out of hand. It's creating a lot of lost jobs and dislocations and recessions because it's being speculative, just like the dollar being speculative. I don't know if we can go back to the gold standard. And I don't know whether we're going to go back to fixed currency rates by law. But something has to be done about out-of-control international currency speculation. Trillions of dollars a day. And it affects real people. It affects real people. It's not just up there in the ether.
I think I'd like to add to that. If you have the ability, if one independent party has the ability to inflate and basically discount the value of the currency at will, you have the ability to create wealth and also basically take away the farm from those working people. And one other thing I'd like to add to the public of this nation is that debt is a form of slavery. And because they're trying to keep our nation in debt, they're trying to keep us as individual citizens in debt, and we need to put it in check. Good. Thank you.
Thank you. Can you get closer to the mic, please?
Somebody else during this time. What would it look like to dismantle and create?
What would it look like to what?
Dismantle.
You have to get very close to the mic.
What would it look like to dismantle what we've got going on?
You have to get close to the mic. I can't hear you.
What would it look like to dismantle the system that we have now and start on the path to single payer?
I can't get every word to understand. What would it look like to?
Well, basically, what would we do with the insurance?
Oh, I see. That's a good point. That's a good point. Yeah. H676, HR 676, pays attention to that. It's called a conversion program, which you're going to unemploy a couple million people, bookkeepers, accountants, health insurance employees. And look that up. Look up physicians for national, what is it? Physicians for what, man?
Healthcare program.
Physicians for Healthcare Program. They address that too. And that's part of it. I mean, you can't just leave these people off. There are a lot of jobs that need to be done in this country that people can be trained for. It's a good question. And I can't go into any great detail, but it has not been ignored. Yes.
Good evening, Mr. Nader. To me, there's still a giant elephant in the room. I use Google. I've learned most of what I know on Google. I've Googled Martin Bush. How many other people have?
Please get close.
Martin Bush. You know who I'm talking about. I'm disappointed to hear you say that a terrorist attack on 9/11. To me, I know who the terrorists are. This nation will never, this nation owes ask for forgiveness from Iraq. I didn't hear that tonight either. On bended knee. This nation needs to get on bended knee. And I am a man who went to a country that never attacked me either. 9/11 is what we're talking about. To me, that's the only hammer that's big enough to get to the systemic metastasis that bloomed on 9/11. Okay, thank you very much.
Whoever you think caused 9/11 was a terrorist attack.
Agreed.
Okay, so let's not. That's 3,000 civilians who were killed. It's not as many civilians in Hiroshima or Nagasaki or Dresden or what the Stalinists have done, Hitler and all the rest of it. But it was a terrorist attack. My point was, we're not ready to defend our democracy from another terrorist attack because it's too weak. It's been brought to its knees. We've lost a lot of liberty and freedom and due process already, and charlatan politicians can take away our liberty under the guise of advancing our security. And if you do that, you can't advance your security. That's what Benjamin Franklin was talking about. Those who are willing to trade freedom for security deserve neither. Last question.
Hi, Ralph. Paul Cohn. I worked on Nader 92. I voted for you every time you've been on the ballot since. I changed my affiliation to Democrat to vote for Obama in the primary. I've gotten nothing but grief from my friends since. How do you feel about that, about people changing their affiliation to vote for the lesser of two evils?
Voters can do whatever they want. I try to persuade them. I just want to give voters more candidates on the ballot, more agendas, more accomplishments, more choice.